All right, I appreciate you coming here today. We are here because I am announcing charges on Officer Greg Bauer of the Grand Rapids Police Department for one charge of careless discharge of a firearm causing property damage of less than $50. Officer Bauer is obviously presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law whenever that does happen, if it does happen. I kind of laid out in the handout a little bit about the law. I cannot get into the specifics of why I made the decision. Given the fact we made charges, a lot of times I'll go into facts and circumstances when I decide not to file charges. But given the fact that we're filing charges, I can't go into the specifics and the details in this case. What I guess I brought you here for is to try and explain maybe why I didn't make decisions on other things. I'm sure there's questions by you and by the community on some other options I may have had. I guess the biggest thing is this is not an assaultive case. I think that's the general idea, is that, okay, we have a firearm discharged towards somebody, there should be more serious charges. And so you look at those. Generally in a firearms and a gun case, you have assault with intent to do great bodily harm or an assault with intent to murder. Okay, you're trying to either hurt somebody or you're trying to kill somebody. And the key word there is intent. There is an intent to do one of those. There's not a shred of evidence in this case that there is an intent by the officer to do either of those things based on the facts and the body cameras and the reports that I reviewed. All right, so you take the intent out, you take those charges off. The next one you could possibly take a look at is a felonious assault with a dangerous weapon. It's, you're trying to scare somebody by using a dangerous weapon, be it a gun or be it a knife. Quite really, a felonious assault happened here, okay? But they're police officers. There's a difference. You and I, if I point a gun at you, for example, I don't have necessarily that right. But in this circumstance, under these facts and what was going on there that night, he had every right to. And you'll see, eventually at some point in time, there's a lot of guns being pointed at people. This was a felony stop. This was a very serious situation in the mind of these officers that they were doing that night. They have a right to pull guns and order people to do things. So a felonious assault does not fit because they're within their rights in what they were doing there that night under these facts and circumstances. So you take the assaultive nature of what occurred out of it because we can't prove that for various reasons. Then you're kind of looking at various different weapons charges. There is a reckless use of a firearm. We kind of got away from that one, and you'll see in my handout here. There's kind of some overlap, even with amongst lawyers. You get into what's the difference between careless, reckless, and negligence, and there's probably not a tremendous great answer. You can argue that you're kind of arguing on the head of a pin there what the difference is. But there is a specific charge, another misdemeanor charge, reckless. We didn't think it meant reckless, and I think the best analogy I can make it in terms of driving. Somebody doing 150 miles an hour down a freeway is reckless. Somebody doing 80, 10 miles over the speed limit, that may be careless. That's the difference. We didn't feel there was a reckless nature here of what occurred. But when you got down to it, it is, negligence or careless. And the definitions as I put them down here, kind of going what the law is fairly use ordinary care. Careless is, you don't use the normal care somebody would. It's got to be something along those lines given the facts and circumstances. I think there's a general idea that there must be some sort of mens rea is always what first year law school criminal law is. There's got to be mens rea. You have to have the intent like I've talked about or something else. But even in the criminal law, another thing in driving, we charge very often. Moving violation causing death, moving violation causing serious injury. Those are a level of essentially carelessness. You run a stop sign and tattoo a car that's coming through the stop sign that has a right of way and you hurt somebody or kill somebody. You didn't intend to do that, but you missed the stop sign because you're correcting your radio, looking down at the floor for, you spilled some fries, or you're yelling at your kids in the back. That's a level of carelessness. So, trying to compare what we're going here, this is the same level. It's carelessness. This is not intentional. This is not malicious. This was something that shouldn't have happened, obviously, but it did. And based on all the facts and circumstances that I reviewed, I felt there was a sufficient basis to file this careless discharge charge. Just a little bit of background. I came out a little bit earlier. This probably isn't a surprise to many of you. I did talk with the command staff at Grand Rapids Police Department yesterday, kind of gave them a heads up that this was in the works. I did talk with Mr. Bauer's attorney yesterday to obviously tell him that this was coming down. And I also talked to Mr. Brown, his attorney as well. So I've kind of thrown this out. It wasn't a huge secret that I'm trying to hide this to the last moment to spring it on everybody. So the fact that it got out is not terribly surprising because I have communicated this to other individuals involved in this incident before making this announcement here today. So the court will proceed. This was under the new statutes. There's not a warrant. There's a summons that is issued. to have him show up. When that will be, that's up to the courts. I've been in communication with his attorney, so I don't anticipate any issues. Quite frankly, he's been very cooperative with the investigation of what's going on here. We'll see what happens as it proceeds in the court. He'll be arraigned at some point in time. Being it's a misdemeanor offense, there isn't the normal preliminary exam. There'll be a pretrial conference, probably guessing sometime in February, maybe March, given what's going on with the variant. But then we'll see from there sometime, if it goes to trial or not. So that's, I guess, a good summary. I think I've covered everything I intended to. Obviously, I'll take questions if anybody has any.
A lot of times, prosecutors will pass investigations off to different counties, prosecutors. Why wasn't that done in this case?
That's a good question, and that's kind of a debate within the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan, and usually that comes up in the the more serious, where we actually have a fatality or a very serious injury, and pretty much the consensus is, Pam, this is what we're elected to do. We are the chief law enforcement officer of the county, and it doesn't matter that we're working with police departments or not. That's part of our job. It's not an outside entity's job. We are responsible to the voters here in the county for the decisions we make, whether it be police, whether it be civilians. So it's not, this is not that much different than any other case I make the decision on. When we do disqualify ourselves, generally when I do, it's something, I know somebody. It's, a detective who comes in this office that I see every day, something along those lines. We send them out in circumstances where there's some sort of personal relationship with myself, maybe a very close relationship with members of the office, that it would give the appearance of impropriety. I know Officer Brower somewhat, but I don't know him that much, and I think there's enough there that I don't think there's enough there to disqualify our office.
Chris, what are the circumstances surrounding how exactly the gun went off? Did the officer have his finger on it?
That's what I can't tell you. That's why I can't discuss the facts. I mean, it's a factual question regarding the case. We have ethical duty by the rules of ethics. I can't get into the facts and circumstances to tell you what comes out in the law, and I can't potentially, if this goes to a jury trial, I can't taint potential jurors because of something I said in January when they hold on to it come next September if it goes to trial then or something like that. So I can't get into those facts.
Can you talk about the history of the officer? Does he have any incidents like this or?
No, not to my knowledge. No, this was a thing. It's my understanding he was actually Officer of the Year, I think, last year, if I remember correctly. So there's this wasn't, geez, we looked at his history and said, boy, he's a bad apple or something, that we're going to tee him up. We kind of tried to take a look at just what happened in this incident and do it as best we can in terms of putting in what he knew and what he reacted to.
Do you recall any similar cases like this ever in the history of the prosecutor's office where a police officer has been charged in this fashion? We've charged police officers. Obviously, we charged a Grand police officer with a criminal sexual conduct. We've had some drunk drivings. I did charge a reckless use of a firearm with a Calvin security officer. That was about the time I first got elected, and that was a few years ago. But obviously they're very rare. This isn't something we do very often. I think for the most part, police do a good job, and I've reviewed a lot of cases involving officers-involved shootings, obviously. But I think there's the law goes in their favor sometimes in terms of self-defense, using deadly force. They have to use deadly force in the course of their job, and so the law recognizes that it's part of their job. And so very often it's when someone gets injured or something, it's because they're acting in self-defense, defense of others. The law gives them a right to do what they do. So I've ruled on these quite a bit, but in terms of charging, I can't think of the one right off the top of my head other than the Calvin one.
Do we know why this gentleman's plates weren't run before there was such a large response?
No. And going to that question, I guess we didn't get into that in terms of what the mistakes were. That was not our role. We're not here as looking at this incident. That we're going to charge him as part of this incident, because we have to look at it as what was he aware of, and he wasn't involved in that. He was getting information. He was there in terms of what that response was. So in terms of the overall view of what reacted, that was not our role here, and so we did not get into the whole investigation. We were trying to focus just specifically on what this officer did.
Do you happen to know if Mr. Smith's plates were run before that response?
I don't. Right off the top of my head, I do not.
Can you think of a circumstance where a citizen, a civilian, might be charged? I mean, it's hard to make that right comparison, but I mean, of
course, I'm thinking that
We-
the police union, for instance, would say, I mean, this was an accident.
Sure.
Would you be charging a civilian similarly?
And I did actually took a look at some of our recent civilian cases, and in terms of, yes, I mean, there's one I reviewed, the guy was just simply waving a gun in a car, and we charged him with a reckless use. So we tried to take a look at it, put that, okay, would a civilian? I asked myself that question. I think, yeah, given there's a discharge based on what I know of the facts, I think, anytime there's a discharge, we're leaning towards, charging somebody because under those specific facts and circumstances when there's no good reason, I guess. A civilian obviously has a right to self-defense, so if that happens in that situation, there's a whole different analysis. But somebody just, firing off a round and hits a house or goes over somebody's head. I'm trying to think. I remember years ago, I was a prosecutor. We had somebody firing a gun. It was up in the north of Rockford. It ricocheted. They had a berm, ricocheted and hit somebody on a golf course. It was up, Rogue River Trails or something like that. And we charged a reckless use. They had a berm and everything, but the way they were using the berm, the power, so we have done this with civilians before, and so I really don't think there's that big of a difference that, this is a police versus civilian. There's somehow a difference. I think very similarly, if this happened with civilian, we'd probably be filing charges.
We've had incidences, many in the past, in the county level and at the city level, where people have been hit,
Mhm.
people have been shot before, and no charges have come from it. So, how do you make the public understand that even though there were instances where somebody actually was shot and there were no charges issued, this time there was no one shot and there were charges issued? How do you clear up that decision?
Going to kind of my prior comments in terms of the right of an officer in terms of using deadly force when they're presented with deadly force. I mean, that's the vast majority of the cases I review is, somebody's pulling a gun on the officer, somebody's pulling, doing something that would lead them to fear for their life. And very often the law is, you have a right to use deadly force in self-defense. And that's what very often those charges hinge on. That right, the Self-Defense Act, the general right to defend yourself against deadly force. That wasn't here. This wasn't a Self-Defense Act, so that changed the analysis quite a bit when you throw in the self-defense aspect of it. That's not here, so it becomes it's almost a smaller analysis because you're dealing with carelessness and negligence.
What penalties does this misdemeanor carry?
It's a 90-day, $100 fine maximum.
Remind me what the damage was to property in this case? Can you remind me what the damage was to the property?
There was just to the home.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
just bullet holes in the, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Any idea if this will affect his job status?
I don't know.
Or is it up to-
Yeah, I really don't know. That's going to be up to the Grand Rapids Police Department, and I don't know.
Right. I mean, just the fact if he gets convicted of a misdemeanor, that's not necessarily.
No, it depends. It depends. I think I know have been officers convicted of misdemeanors, so that are still in the force. So I don't know what's going to happen. It depends on what the policy of each individual department is and how they, I guess what the misdemeanor is too, to some extent.
Do we know if Officer Bauer's gun was drawn at the time, or was it in his holster?
I'm not going to get in the facts. That's why I can't get in too much. I'll let you know a house was hit, but that's about it.
Are you concerned about how this will impact the psyche of officers on the street right now at all? I mean, is there concern regarding that?
No, not really. I think they understand that they're in a tough job, and I think we have a good enough relationship with that office that we've worked with them. We have a good line of communication, and I've explained my position. I'm sure they're not thrilled with it. They're not doing handstands, and it's not something they are thinking is a great idea. But I think they understand we have a role. They have a role. We don't always agree on things. We don't always agree on charges on cases they bring over here that should be charged, what they should be charged with. So disagreements on charges is not something that's that abnormal that somehow is going to throw things into a huge issue. At least I hope not. But I've had good frank discussions with the command staff, and we'll go on from there as we have with other cases.
How long has Officer Bauer been on the force?
Over 20 years. I'm not exactly sure. He's not new.
Okay. Have you reviewed body cam footage or dash cam?
Yep.
From
We reviewed reports, body cam, dash cam, just about everything that was there that night.
and there's a lot of body cam?
I wouldn't say a lot, but there's I guess that's always comparative to a lot of the cases we review that we see a lot more. I mean, there's a good amount of it, but it's not an overwhelming amount.
The officer involved was wearing body cam?
Correct. Anything else? Okay, appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.